Good afternoon, everybody. Madam Governor, thank you very much for having us all here. I'm Trey Guy. I'm the moderator for Guam and the Strategic Crosshairs panel. Many thanks to everybody here. As the title suggests, we'll be focusing on the increasing complex security environment facing Guam. Guam is strategically vital to the U.S. interest in the Indo-Pacific, as Admiral Paparo and the Governor said earlier this morning, and finds itself at the convergence of evolving threats from China, Russia, and North Korea, as you just saw from the threat and posture brief. This panel isn't just about identifying threats, it's about proactive engagement. We'll be digging deep into Guam's critical requirements and vulnerabilities, not only in the traditional domains like missile defense, but also in the emerging battlefields and battlegrounds of cyber, space, and missile warfare. We'll also explore the challenging realities of the gray zone, tactics, hybrid warfare scenarios, where the lines blur between peace and conflict. Understanding these nuances are crucial for the effective defense. Most importantly, we will examine the practical mitigation efforts. We aim to discuss strategies for bolstering Guam's resilience, for proactive civil preparations to strengthening our national and regional deterrence credibility. The goal is to ensure Guam remains a stable, secure, and vital hub for homeland defense, deterrence against aggression, and regional stability. I'm deeply honored to introduce our distinguished panel of experts who bring an unparalleled wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience to this critical conversation. First, we're privileged to have Major General Faroe from Indo-PACOM. He's the J00MA, or the Comms Mobilization Assistant. General Faroe brings a crucial role in shaping the strategic messaging and information operations across the Indo-Pacific theater, ensuring the narratives are effectively communicated to both allied and potential adversaries, thereby bolstering regional deterrence. Next, we have Brigadier General Parker, Commanding General of the 94th Army Air and Missile Defense Command. General Parker is responsible for air and missile defense of the Indo-Pacific region and brings the expertise and command and staff assignments in the Army, as well as integrating joint capabilities. Next, we welcome Rear Admiral Midas, Commander of Joint Region Marianas, the Department of War's only joint region. Admiral Midas owns installation responsibilities across Guam and the Marianas. He is responsible for coordinating emergency management, preparations, and the response, and represents Guam on Defensive Wars, Washington, D.C. based Coordination Council and working groups. Next, we also welcome Colonel Mendoza, the Deputy Commander of the 36th Air Wing at Anderson Air Force Base. Colonel Mendoza is a seasoned mobility pilot with experience in aircraft operations, contingency response, and disaster relief. Finally, we welcome Colonel Nikki Harris, Chief of Information Ops Division within U.S. Indo-PACOM. Nikki is a professional information operations officer. Her deployed experience in Afghanistan and her experience on air staff at the Pentagon will continue to help the command. Please join me in giving the panelists a warm welcome. We encourage an open and robust discussion and welcome the questions from the audience later in this session. I would like to begin the discussion by offering each of the panelists to offer a brief opening statement to start the conversation. Major General Faroe.
There we go again. Half a day and good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be back home on Guam. I'm actually a Guam Guardsman, Guam Air National Guard, assigned to Indo-PACOM as a mobilization assistant to Admiral Paparo. This panel is a lot more knowledgeable than I am, so I'm here to be their cheerleader and pile along with comments as able, but we've got some great people with some great knowledge and expertise that we hope to answer your questions with in the next hour or so. So for me, Guam's not just a forward operating base. Like all of us, it's home. It's home to our people, our communities, our families, and it sits at the very heart of America's ability to project peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, like Admiral Paparo mentioned. As we just heard, and we look at the challenges ahead, from missile threats to cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, to natural disasters, the common thread there is resilience. Our responsibility is not only to defend the island militarily, but to ensure that the people of Guam are prepared, protected, and confident in their future. I look forward to exploring how we can strengthen our defenses, deepen cooperation with the communities, our allies, our partners, and build the kind of resilience that ensures Guam remains a secure, thriving hub in the region for the years to come. Thank you.
Hafa I don't know, that sounds kind of weak right now. I think lunch may be having an impact on everybody right now, so let's try that again. Hafa All right, way better, so I appreciate everyone. Madam Governor, thank you so much. Great to see you again, and thank you so much for having us here for this event. So, Commander of 94th AAMDC, so what does that mean? So, essentially I wear 3 hats within the theater. The first hat I wear is the Senior Army Air and Missile Defense Commander within the theater. The second hat I wear is the Theater Air and Missile Defense Coordinator for the U.S. Army Pacific Commander. The third hat I wear is really a joint hat, where my command is direct support to the Pacific Air Forces Commander, and under the auspices of Deputy Area Air Defense Commander. And then my final hat is my newest hat that I wear, effective a couple of months ago, and that's the Senior Army Element Commander for Guam. And that's where, I've got to know my new best friends and Brent Midas and Dan Cooley and Josh Lasky. But my history goes back, much further. I was a young lieutenant colonel back in 2013 working on the Army staff who actually came in on Easter Sunday of 2013 working the initial deployment of THAAD to Guam. Fast forward to 2014 when I took battalion command, one of my THAAD batteries was on one of those rotations when I deployed forward into Turkey. Had an element in Turkey, element at Fort Bliss, Texas, and then the THAAD battery in Guam. Fast forwarding in a couple of more years, and Echo 3 was one of my batteries at that time who did the first PCS move into Guam. Then again into 2017 to 2020, when I was the G5 and the Chief of Staff of the 94th AAMDC at that time. So I have a lot of history with this particular mission, and it means quite a bit to me because of that. And at the end of the day, the capabilities that we want to bring in and create the Guam defense system kind of further those initial objectives, that we had, back in 2013. Again, as we look into the future, into 27 and beyond. Defensive capabilities, again, here to protect the island and people of Guam. And very much look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, my friend. Hafa Day. That's pretty good. I didn't have to ask him to go twice. Yes. I was his new best friend. So it's great to be with you. My name is Brett Midas. I became the Joint Region Marianas Commander on the 29th of May. Since that time, it's been a delight to be here, to first get a chance to meet the people, to be embraced by the community, to get a chance, even before I took over, to meet the governor, lieutenant governor, Speaker Blas, and just to be part of this One Guam work that we all need to do. It's been really, really fun, and it's been awesome over the last 3 months to really listen, to learn, and to get a really good sight picture of the work we need to do together. I'm the guy, as I listen to all these things, I'm the guy day in and day out that's working all the issues that have come up in just about every question in this space this morning. I started my day doing a 7 o'clock VTC with the Pentagon, one of the myriad acronyms of governance that we have here, working the GICSWIG. And at that meeting, we were just very deliberate about understanding a couple of things. One is we're really at the spot where we understand the capabilities that are coming to Guam. Each of the services has a major capability. We focused today on GDS and the Army's leadership in that, but in the past we talked about DPRI and where the Marine Corps is. But as we get to this spot in time, we understand what those capabilities are. And from those capabilities, we're able to develop a growth curve. Not going to talk about the specifics of that today, but it's understanding exactly who's going to come to the island and when, and then working with the governor through our CMCC to talk at our next meeting about who's coming when. And then from that, after capabilities and who's coming, we have an idea of what those enablers are. The things like roads, the things like power, fuel, quality of life issues, housing, utilities, all of the things that are required to make sure that those capabilities have what they need, but more importantly, to make sure that our people have what we need. Whether they're civilian or military, it's about making sure that Guam in 10 years has more capabilities, but is fundamentally better, which really gets to my last point. The word that Admiral Paparo used, I've heard him use it before, and I love it, is just the simple word of duty. It's the duty that we all have on the stage, all of us in uniform have, to protect America. That protection of America begins here in Guam, and that duty is something that I'm excited about. I look forward to the work. I'll say often, there's no secrets, there's just hard work that needs to get done. Thank you. Dan.
Thank you so much, sir. Hey, buenas and half a day. Dan Mendoza, I'm the Wing Deputy Commander for the 36th Wing over at Anderson Air Force Base. First and foremost, I have to start by saying thank you, si su samasi. My family and I, we've had the privilege of being assigned here just over a year ago, and I've got to say, just what an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of being able to be assigned here and getting connected with a community and a people that have such an incredible rich and deep culture of compassion and strength. So to the Chamorro people, thank you for allowing us to live here and work here alongside of you. I love this forum. I applaud the governor and the team here. We've seen a lot of great questions. I think dialogue, transparency, right, is where we can come from a place of mutual respect and understanding. There is no question that Guam, as an inherently strategic important location in the Indo-Pacific theater. But I want to tell you that we are here with open ears and an open heart to understand where the community is coming from so that we can do this better. You heard about integrated planning. You heard about how do we harden our capabilities, our defenses, our infrastructure. I see in the crowd one of my really good friends out there, Colonel Jason Sanders. We talk about where that voice is as we work through this. At Anderson Air Force Base, I can tell you within our units, we have local guardsmen embedded in our units working side by side, and there's no greater honor than to serve with the community. So thank you for the partnership. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, gentlemen. It's great to be here with such esteemed and incredible panelists. Ma'am, over to you, Nikki.
Half a day. Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, I'm at Indo-PACOM on Oahu, Hawaii. This is my first time traveling to Guam, so it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. As mentioned, information operations is my background. I've made a career of it in the Air Force. And coming to Indo-PACOM and hearing Admiral Paparo saying that information operation is a priority piece of his strategy in deterrence was just awesome. So it's made things incredibly busy for me, but it's also been a privilege and honor to serve under Admiral Paparo. What we do in terms of information operations, essentially it's leveraging military capabilities to the maximum effect to change the adversary's behavior. So we're focused a lot at Indo-PACOM on perceptions and getting to the point where we are changing the decision calculus and the behavior of our adversaries. We want China to never get to the point where they think it's okay to invade Taiwan. We don't want them to get to the point where they think it's okay to lob a missile at Guam or any other part of the U.S. We consider both the physical and cognitive environment together. So it's not enough for us just to have military capabilities. They have them too, but we have to wrap them in messaging and how we strategically communicate those capabilities. That helps with deterrence. So that's all I wanted to say, just to get things started. I appreciate being here again. And I'll turn it back over to Trey.
Thank you all for your remarks. I've crafted a few follow-up questions based on the themes mentioned in the opening statement and designed to spur discussion among our panelists. First question for the group at large is the Governor and Admiral Paro mentioned this morning that Guam is on the front lines of the U.S. posture in the Western Pacific and how Guam makes the rest of the U.S. stronger. What are the most pressing issues, in your opinions, that need to be addressed to help strengthen not only the military, but Guam writ large in this partnership to make us stronger together?
So Trey, I'll probably take an opening salvo at this one. Look, at the end of the day, and I appreciated the question during the last session. At the end of the day, if we can do what we need to do and not fire a shot and deter, that's a win. If we don't have to fire a shot, that's a win. But it's getting into being able to change that decision calculus of potential adversaries is going to get us there. However, we must be prepared to transition to periods of crisis or conflict. In doing that, you know, if Mario didn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, 106% increase in development of ballistic missiles by the PRC in the last 5 years. 106% within their inventory. We are seeing investments by China within this area, and we see that continuing. Within this area, right, not only do we see a capacity increase, but we also see a capability increase. You know, it's not only the number of systems they have, but their systems are going to continue to improve as technology writ large continues to develop, right? It's a natural process, and that's what we talk about when we talk about, you know, being able to pace the threat where the threat is going. Greater technology yields greater capabilities that the adversary can potentially use against us. And that's why, you know, in looking at the Guam defense system, and I think we talked about it a little bit at the last session too, you know, it's going to be a development over time in terms of we are going to continue to add capability that we have based on being able to pace where the threat is going. And we're going to have to continue to be able to adjust to that. As Admiral Paro mentioned earlier, you know, it's about getting as close to perfect as we can possibly get. And that's where we are trying to strive for within the Guam defense system, right? We will have capability in 27, and it will continue to mature and improve over time. And I just wanted to reemphasize that point because as you have heard, you know, the governor talk, you've heard Admiral Paparo talk, you've heard a lot of other people speak to the fact that America's Day starts here. This is Homeland Defense, and this is our department's #1 priority. but we need to continue to push the development of future capabilities to meet the future evolving threat. And that's something, that I know, the services writ large are working at doing. Our initial tranche of capability for the Guam Defense System is going to be some of the most modernized equipment that we have, speaking from an Army perspective, within the Army inventory. These are new capabilities. They're not even fielded yet. But we're looking to employ them here in Guam first. That's how important this mission is to us. That's how important first being able to establish deterrence is. By showing we are putting the greatest capability that we can in the defense of Guam. So one of the things, that we're constantly looking at is where the threat is going and how we can, continue to evolve what we are doing, whether it's in capability or tactics, techniques, and procedures that we can employ, to further expand that capability.
Yeah, thanks. I'll riff off that for just 1 second. The idea of peace through strength. In getting to the island, one of the great gifts I have is pretty much every senior DC leader that comes to the island comes to our office. And it's interesting in that moment because I need to quickly figure out where they are in their knowledge of Guam and then get them to a spot at the end where they become an advocate for what we're doing here. And in doing so, I became a quick expert, at least to the outside observer, in the history of Guam. And Guam is not important because anybody on this panel, the governor, Admiral Paparo, says so. Guam is important because history says that Guam is important. History will change over time, but one thing has been consistent for a long, long time, for centuries, is that Guam is important. And so with that, as you work through what we're doing here, I would ask you to think about what the counter narrative might be. So you can imagine just, okay, well, let's see what the commitment is to Guam. Is the Department of War putting their backbench technologies there or their latest technologies, their most advanced capabilities? As Bill said, the most advanced things we have are coming here. And then you say, okay, well, are they going to prove that they care by defending it or not defending it? We're putting our very best, things that we haven't done before, we're going to learn, we're going to bring them here through Guam Defense System. So we're giving our best to Guam. We're committing to defending our best and our people of Guam. The other thing you could say is, well, what's it like? Is the Department of Defense kind of behind a screen not talking to anybody? No. I'm never more than a text or a phone call away from the governor on any issue on any given day. And we meet with them once a quarter to go through any particular issue and to make sure that we can make progress on the things that matter most. And then imagine the thing, well, is the Department of Defense only have a relationship like that, or are they willing to have a forum like this, where we meet, where we talk, where we build transparency, where we build trust, where we take hard questions? And the reason the Guam Defense Forum is awesome is because we're here talking and taking those hard questions. And so I think that peace through strength is proven day in and day out. And I would say it's also peace through strength and unity, and that's what GDF is helping to bring more of here in Guam. Thanks.
Absolutely. No, well said, sir. I think if I could just build upon that as well, I love the previous question when the question was, what other deterrence projects do we have coming up in the future? And I think we need to take a step back a little bit as well. And I'm sure, Nikki, and when you look at information operations, right, what really is deterrence? Deterrence is this forum right now. It's us coming together. It is demonstrating that there are no gaps and seams between your federal, local government, right, your Department of War, your military, and the local community, right? Every single time that we have an exercise or that we have allies and partners coming through or that we can show a picture, a video, another story about how we're able to come together, how we're able to integrate, how we can demonstrate that we have that interoperability, we are, again, forcing our adversaries to relook at their decision calculus and go, today is not the day to try to attack. Why? Because there's no gaps and seams between that community and between those federal organizations.
Thank you all. Sir, you want to? I apologize.
No, one quick pile-on. You know, for me as a former fighter pilot, I think of, you know, defense in two ways, both active and passive. And as a Department of War, we've identified areas that we need help with on both those. You know, I mean, for the active defense, that's kinetic, you know, basically what the Guam defense system is rooted in. I think we can all agree that, you know, where we're falling short is a deep magazine, you know, and so we have to work with our, you know, industry partners and Congress to buy the magazine and get the necessary capabilities we need in the quantities we need to meet the threat that you guys saw. And as far as passive defense goes, that's where I think we can make money as well and actually make the enemy think twice about, you know, whether or not today's the day. And we do that by making investments in infrastructure that we're already doing right now that you're seeing, whether it's up at Anderson, where it's some of the hardening of the aircraft shelters, fuel depots, comm facilities, things like that go a long way to actually getting the enemy, because he's watching us. He's watching us, you know, optically through the electromagnetic spectrum, and then also through cyber. And anything we can do to disrupt that observation and get them to think that, wow, what they do next, this cyber tool is not working anymore. Okay, we can't rely on that. Let's, maybe not today. And again, the further we can kick that can down the road, the better we are, and the more challenging they're going to be, the further we can do that. So that's kind of what I think of when I think of, you know, how we can improve the defensive posture and architecture here in Guam.
Looking ahead to the next 5 or 10 years, what are trends that will shape not only Guam's security, but the homeland defense landscape, and how should we prepare for these future challenges?
Yeah, I would simply say that we never know exactly what's going to happen. And so it's one of the great challenges of being part of the Department of War is you want to plan for one thing, and the minute you put all your eggs in one basket, then things change. And so I think that for us, to go back to my last comment, history says how important this is going to be. History says that Guam matters. And so I think as trends come in and trends go, the important work for us is to sustain the effort. We've seen in Guam, and I get a chance to brief what Guam looked like at the end of the Vietnam War, at the end of the Cold War. We watched what happened back in 2004 when we went down to only about 2,600 active duty. And now building out of that is one of the challenges that we have. And so I think the important thing for us is regardless of where trends are, and we'll adapt to what happens in the world, we always do as the Department of War. But for us as a unified team, it's keeping our eye on the capabilities that are coming, the defense systems that are coming, to understanding and building those enablers so that the people of Guam, whether civilian or uniformed, have what they need in the long term.
I think one trend that we will see continue will be the speed at which disinformation and misinformation travels. And Guam and no parts of the U.S. Are immune from this. And so I don't think we'll see a change in that. You're starting to see AI become more and more realistic, deep fakes, things like that. And so I think you'll see that trend continue to increase. So in preparation for that, and things we are already doing and should continue to do, is build in the resilience domestically of our populations to be able to discern that false, misleading information that's flowing through the internet, thousands and thousands of terabytes or in seconds or milliseconds at a time. And we've gotten to the point where I think populations are just seeing snippets of things, and users are just picking up snippets of information and not necessarily verifying it. And no one has time to verify that information, or people are not willing to do the research to make sure that what they're seeing is from a valid source. So I think that will definitely be something that will continue to trend upwards, because doing things in the information space tends not to be the thing that triggers us to war, right? To armed conflict. We're seeing that our adversaries utilize the information space to do things short of war. It's an open space, you can do it, cyber attacks, things like that. We have not gone to war over those or armed conflict. So it's something that they can do in large quantities to a great degree. Day after day, troll farms, constantly infusing within our information space of the US, disinformation and misinformation. And those things are going after dissent within our populations, grievances within our populations, things that can divide our country along certain lines. So we're very vulnerable to that, and we need to keep that in mind in terms of building resilience for our populations. When we go to war, we wear a lot of physical PPE, right? Helmet and flak jacket, all that sort of stuff. And so we need to also think about the cognitive PPE for our populations to make them more resilient to that.
So I think one thing, obviously within the last few years, there's been a lot happen in the world. What will be interesting, right? Because we can say that there are observations being made, out of the 12-day war, out of the fight against Hamas, out of the fight in Ukraine, but until a potential adversary does something about it, it's just an observation. They have to do something about it in order to make it a lesson learned. And how they implement that over time will be interesting to see what lessons they choose to learn coming out of the observations on the end of these particular fights, and how that they can potentially apply that, going into the future.
One thing we're all tracking is, my former neighbor, Tello brought up, Senator Tello Talegui, was the proliferation of unmanned systems, whether they're undersea, on the surface, or in the air, or even for that matter, up in space. Over the next 5 or 10 years, with the advancement of artificial intelligence and the like, that proliferation is going to be a challenge, and I think it's going to be a challenge for not just us, but for our adversaries as well. So, how we get after that, it's going to be you're already seeing some of the changes within the Department of War and how we integrate with our civilian organizations like the FAA and things like that to actually track not just restricted airspace over military bases and military installations, but airspace in general, okay? Think over cities, municipalities, critical infrastructure. All of that is gonna, require an increased sense of awareness and probably include sensors and spectrums that we're not really looking at right now very seriously, and all to give us that better picture so that we can, gain a better idea of what those threats are that are out there and how we deal with them. So I think that's probably one of the bigger ones, and I know we, as a DOW, are looking to also exploit but also protect against those capabilities.
Absolutely. If I can just add a little bit to that as well, so as we look at trends, right, within the next 5 to 10 years, we're on an island, right? So the environment very much still a strategic consideration. I think it was incredible to see how the community came together, especially after Typhoon Mawar, right? So when we talk about resiliency and where we're able to fill those gaps in, that just demonstrates that those relationships between academia, industry, local government, and the military are just as important more than ever, because we know that we're going to continue to have to face those natural disasters, and our ability to bounce back and continue to execute the mission while we're working hand in hand with the community to recover is going to be absolutely critical. We're also going to continue to be even more interconnected, right, with our allies and partners in other countries within the region. And that just goes back to a basic where, we can only really move at the speed of trust, and taking the time to drink the tea, right, with your allies and partners, build those relationships, and not just across the region, but even just here within the CNMI and the territories out here, working with local government so that when the next disaster strikes, when the next contingency or crisis strikes, we already know who's on the other end of the line. We have that trust established, and we're able to move out quickly to execute.
So Dan, that's a really good point. In Admiral Paparo talked about this, and Chris and team talked about this. What happens in the first island chain, right, impacts here. So as we look at ally and partner capabilities, continuing to push for the maximum amount of interoperability we can, because what is happening in the first island chain coming here, well, now we can increase our ability for early warning, our decision space, and to enable, again, if crisis or conflict comes, our ability to deal with those threats.
Thank you. We've talked, or we've heard this morning and throughout the day about some of the potential challenges of an increased military presence here on Guam. As military leaders, what can we do to mitigate the negative effects on the local community and the environment?
Yeah, I'll start real quick and just talk about two things. One, by telling a story. We talked earlier today about environmental protections, and we talked about the importance of the Department of War following laws. Just as one story that I get a chance to go around and meet commands, and I met this one command, and their building is really old, and it kind of leaks, and it doesn't look very good. And they went through the process, and they designed a new building. It's a great design. They've got the money for the building. They went to start working it, and lo and behold, they found an endangered species on the spot. And for those that are naysayers or don't believe, you might think, well, they just kind of picked it up, threw it aside, and went to go develop their building. That's not what's happened. We've been going through the process to make sure that we do everything the correct way, that once we identified that, to ideally be able to relocate it and not just continue with the military construction. And so that's an example of issue by issue when things come up. It's important for all of us to just continue to do things the right way. The other thing that we're working on from a JRM perspective is we've heard the term, and we've used the term in the past, One Guam. And fundamentally what we're working on with our MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, our team that's focused on quality of life, is dusting off our version of One Guam, which really focuses on what happens when you're sitting somewhere in the continental United States and your boss calls you in and says, hey, you got orders, and okay, orders where? Orders to Guam. How do we make it so that that service member, whether they're with a family or without, immediately feels connected to who we are as a One Guam team, can get to the island safely, effectively, without incurring debt, getting into the right house. And as important, and this is one of the things the team is working on, and they'll brief me next week, is just how do we connect them to the local community? We don't want them to just be aware of resources on the base. We want them to be aware of where do they go, depending on what their interests are or are not, to be able to reach out to connect with the local community so that we're able to make sure that that family has a great experience here as a military member, but more importantly, as a military member as part of the broader Guam community.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Brett, and I think, Admiral Paparo talked it earlier as well, just be transparent and be good neighbors. Our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, We're going to be neighbors. And I think where I have seen, over the course of the last 30 years, where I have seen situations at their best and organizations thrive is where the organizations on the, green, blue, whatever suit side are working hand in hand with their counterparts and their neighbors, just off post, off base. That's where situations and that's where communities thrive when that happens. So, absolutely.
Wonderful question, right? I think considering all the topics that we've talked about. So I think two things. The first one, and again, just going back to how resilient the community was, especially after the typhoon, right? So before I was in this job, I was the 36th Contingency Response Group Commander, and under my unit, we have a Red Horse Squadron, so civil engineering squadron, that's able to react quickly. And right after the typhoon, as soon as Anderson was able to, again, pick up and start executing missions, we sent our civil engineers and our folks off base to rebuild over 136 different roofs right out in the community. So how do we mitigate those impacts? It's how do we share that capacity? How do we integrate with the community? And there's an education piece to that as well, right? I would say to my brothers and sisters in arms wearing the uniform who are assigned here, if you've not made it out to the Museum of Guam, take the time to educate yourself on the history here and understand and connect with the culture. All of our units at Anderson have strong relationships and partnerships with the villages and with the mayors, and it's incumbent upon us to be respectful of being guests here on the island with the community and educating ourselves so that we have a better understanding of where we are, so that we can make sure that we can see each other and we can hear each other as we have these discussions. And then finally, you hit the nail on the head, sir, right? It's all about compliance. There's federal laws, there's regulations. It's holding us accountable to make sure that we're aligned with federal law, policy, so that we're mitigating those impacts as we continue to grow.
And I'll just briefly piggyback on everything everyone said. Ditto to all of it. From an information perspective, I think open lines of communication are extremely important to all of this, right? So as mentioned by Admiral Paparo, that transparency, teamwork, dialogue, and ultimately respect is what's critical. And I think all of you highlighted that, and we utilize our information resources to make sure that those lines of communication are open. So whether it's public affairs, whether it's our leadership engagements, whether it's advocating at the federal level for Guam, I think that's extremely important.
So I have a, part of my responsibilities at Indo-PACOM includes the land retention issue in Hawaii, which many of you probably know is a very emotional, political hot potato that we're going through right now. But I think the message and the requirements and how we approach it is the same. I think Dan kind of mentioned, the education part. So how we're approaching it there is, it's educating not only our military members on the local culture, i.e. like a Hawaii 101, think of maybe like a Chamorro 101 for our service members as they come in, so that they can identify and be familiar with the cultural customs and do's and don'ts, and even simple things like when you go in the house, take off your slippers, take off your shoes, things like that. Because at the end of the day, you can't surge trust. Trust is something that you gotta build over time, and so it's not gonna be easy, but, and then as far as the education goes, not only is there say a Chamorro 101, which is inward facing towards our DOW members, but there's also an outward facing, DOW 101, where to the community, this is the why we're here. This is why Guam matters. This is why we need to find a way to reach a shared understanding on what we're here. We're not going to agree on everything. And notice I said understanding and not agreement. We're not going to agree on everything, but hopefully we can get to the point where we can narrow that gulf and get to a point where maybe we can find ways to work together and communicate. The best way we can do that is including our Guam National Guard in not only in the Guam Defense Mission, but in the discussions. Because we are the community. We're there. We're in the towns. We're in the villages. Okay? So collaboration, working towards that trust, having somebody at the table who is feeding both sides of the community, military and civil. You know, back at home in Hawaii, I'm Hawaiian and I'm military. So again, it's that bridge, and utilizing your guard forces to help communicate that and get that through, I think, is critical. And the last thing is, we gotta act. We gotta show up. We gotta identify specific points and areas where we can collaborate as a group to build that trust, build that transparency, so that we can go forward and keep that resiliency in Guam that will then, you know, fuel the deterrence to get China to say, not today, not today.
Thank you. Before we open it up for questions for the last couple minutes that we have, I'd like to offer to any of the panelists, are there any questions or statements that have been made today that you'd like to provide follow-up or any clarification remarks on?
So I think to the General's last point with respect to the Guam Guard, you know, I was in 94th WMDC when we stood up the Guam Guard Security Force mission. It's absolutely been an incredible partnership that exists to this day. And a matter of fact, our last USERPAC Squad of the Year competition was a squad from the Guam Guard, and we have that represent the 94th WMDC. So it's that relationship that we have fostered over time that goes to building that trust that you talked about. And I think there are still a lot of opportunities out there to be able to use to increase that trust and transparency.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to add is we will talk for the rest of today. We've already talked, and we'll talk tomorrow about myriad problems and myriad challenges that we have. And identifying those is critically important. But there's no leader that will be able to snap their fingers and overnight make all those challenges go away, or be able to fix all the problems as fast as any of us would like to have them fixed. And so I would just as you think through these things, it's trust and transparency with the local government, with the federal government, so that we can do the long, hard, and sustained work that's going to be required. We'll communicate to you successes, we'll communicate to you failures, but it's that long, sustained work that's going to be required to get to where we need to be. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have time for a couple questions. We'll start in the middle.
Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Flores. I'm here as a community member. And, you know, with all due respect, it is really hard to remain respectful hearing some of the things we're hearing here today. There are those of us in this room who do not see the benefits to a lot of what's being proposed, and we have evidence for this. We have receipts. You're talking about threats to our water system. Tomorrow night, there's a meeting for deodorant contamination that's present at more than 3 military sites affecting the most populated village of Guam. That's caused by military contamination. We have a PFAS Superfund site on Anderson Air Force Base, a site so contaminated it requires long-term cleanup. And we have another Superfund site at the Orda dump, a former military dump, also near a water source. We have 30% of the island occupied by the bases. So many ancestral burials desecrated. You're saying that the issue in Hawaii is an emotional one? You are contaminating and desecrating their homeland. This is our homeland. And with all due respect, it doesn't matter how much you say homeland over and over and over again. This is not your homeland. This is our homeland. And it doesn't matter how many times you say half a day over and over and over again. It is clear that you do not have the cultural competence or sensitivity to recognize what you're demanding of us and what you're really asking us to risk and to sacrifice. We are the second island chain. We are not disposable. We are not just the stomping grounds and collateral damage to protect the mainland. That is not our mainland. This is our mainland. We are the Chamorro people. This is our homeland. And you are violating our human rights, our dignity, and our indigenous rights. With every single incident of contamination and destruction, that missile defense system cannot protect us from nuclear attacks. And earlier this morning, somebody asked about the nuclear reactors that are going to be placed here for the missile defense system. Nobody bothered to address that person's point. Everybody glossed over it. And if we are hit by a bomb and one of those nuclear reactors is struck, that ruins our water forever. That ruins our soil forever. And this is our homeland, and where else are we going to go? We don't have to look very far to look at the Marshall Islands to see what permanent displacement looks like for the islanders in the Marshall Islands. And the fact that that military waste was never removed. We have nowhere here to store any nuclear waste from those reactors for the missile defense system. And here we are in this hotel with everybody here missing their jobs today. How much taxpayers' money is being spent for this lip service, this propaganda? This does not make us feel more safe. The Guam buildup ensures ecological crisis, housing crisis, healthcare crisis, water crisis. This is more insecurity, not keeping us safe. You've changed your name to the Department of War. At least it's more accurate. But that's my question. How much taxpayers' money is being wasted? As far as what I heard today is GITA is funding this. The University of Guam is funding this, and the governor's office. First of all, I want to thank our agencies for trying to give us a forum to engage, but this is not a real community engagement. And what you're saying up there is not real transparency. You're talking about it like it's an abstract, something in the future. This destruction has already happened, and it's happening now. And let me tell you something. People have already died and are still dying because of the military contamination that is still here. We have people who have lost children to leukemia because of contamination on the Air Force Base. We have elders dying of renal disease because they have survived nuclear contamination from the military testing in the Marshall Islands. And we have had jet fuel spills here when we have not found out about it for over 1 year. So there's been no transparency. The governor isn't even sure when the next wave of the Marines is coming. After the first 100 came last December, that was in the newspaper just a couple weeks ago. She doesn't know when. You guys are not telling her. So you can say transparency over and over again. You can say homeland over and over again and mainland over and over again. You can say half a day all you want. But with all due respect, that doesn't mean you understand anything that we are going through here, and that we do not want nuclear reactors here, and we do not want you to make us a target for war. We refuse to be a first strike community, and we demand justice, sovereignty, and land back. Si Dios Masi.
Thank you very much, Monica. We appreciate your passion, but thank you very much.